Anneliese was a kind, loving, sweet and obedient girl. But when she was possessed, it was something unnatural, something that you cannot explain. The horrific events which led to the death of Anneliese Michel have become a modern legend. Most people know of her as the inspiration for the film The Exorcism of Emily Rose. To some, she is an unofficial Catholic saint, a woman of holy goodness who suffered and died for our sins. Others would argue that Anneliese is the archetype of what happens when religious fervor goes too far. Yet, overwhelmingly, she is remembered as the tragic figure behind one of the most well-known and terrifying cases of demonic possession. Undeniable to all who research or hear of Anneliese is how our fundamental understanding of the world around us is challenged by her story. Born in 1952, Anneliese came from a small Bavarian town by the name of Klingenberg, situated in the midst of the Catholic heartland of Germany. Her upbringing was religious. Her family were devout traditional Catholics, so traditional in fact that it was considered a long-standing family tradition to dedicate at least one child to an ecclesiastical career. Anneliese herself expressed the desire to one day become a teacher of the principles of the Catholic religion. Such a devout religious upbringing could provide evidence for her later possession being the result of religious fanaticism. However, it is important to understand what Catholicism meant in Germany. A psychological study conducted in 1974 determined that only 63% of Catholic theologians in Germany believed in the devil. When members of the public were asked a similar question 2 years later, an overwhelming 89% denied the existence of the devil. Germans, both Catholic and non-Catholic, were highly skeptical about the very existence of Satan. Furthermore, in more recent times, it has been estimated that there are only 3 Catholic exorcists in Germany who operate in secret. Contrast that to neighbouring France, where there are 70 exorcists who openly practice their trade. German society is and was structured towards strict rationality, even in religious matters. This means that the social environment which Anneliese grew up in did not recognise the devil and demonic possession as real things, making it problematic to discredit the case immediately as an instance of religious fervour. Looking beyond the religious convictions of her family, there is much to suggest that Anneliese had a normal childhood. Anneliese's parents, Anna and Joseph, have been described as strict yet protective. Her mother recalled how Anneliese liked life, sang willfully, and was an intelligent girl. This opinion of her was shared by many of her classmates. To all who encountered her, Anneliese was a quiet and happy girl. It was around the time of Anneliese's 16th birthday that her life began to change. In the September of 1968, she lost consciousness at school. Later that evening, sometime after midnight, Anneliese woke up, paralysed. She lost control of her bladder, her breathing was laboured, and her tongue felt sore. The moment quickly passed, but left Anneliese terrified. The episode, although frightening, was soon forgotten. It was not until almost a year later, on the afternoon of the 24th of August 1969, that Anneliese had cause to remember. She suffered another brief blackout, followed by paralysis later the same day. The following morning, Anna took her daughter to see the family physician. Upon his referral, an appointment with neurologist Dr. Siegfried Luthi was arranged. On the 27th of August, Anneliese had an EEG, which determined her brain activity to be normal. The doctor concluded that Anneliese was probably experiencing cerebral seizures, with symptoms of grand mal epilepsy. At this point, however, no anticonvulsant medication was prescribed. Prior to this, Anneliese's medical history had been marred with illness. Before the age of 5, she had contracted mumps, measles, and scarlet fever. She was regarded such a delicate child by her kindergarten teacher that her parents were counselled into keeping her home a year longer than the other children. Not long after her visit to Dr. Lucy, Anneliese suffered from a terrible sore throat, which resulted in her tonsils being removed. After this, she contracted pneumonia. This was further complicated by a tuberculosis infection. At one point, her symptoms were so bad that she stopped attending school and was confined to her bed. On the 28th of February 1970, with no improvement in her condition, Anneliese was admitted to a clinic in Middelburg, which specialized in treating lung disease in young people. Before too long, her parents were informed that she had heart and circulatory problems. In June 1970, Anneliese experienced a terrifying third episode. She visited a different neurologist, Dr. Van Halle, and was subjected to another EEG. This time, however, the test revealed a series of irregularities. The doctor observed irregular alpha wave patterns as well as scattered delta and theta waves in Anneliese's brain. As such, she was prescribed anticonvulsant medication. This marked the beginning of her treatment for epilepsy. On the 29th of August, Anneliese was finally allowed to return home. By now, it should be obvious to all that Anneliese Michel was far from a healthy young woman. It was sometime during her stay at the Middelburg clinic that Anneliese first reported encountering Fratzen, the German word for grimaces. Later, in September 1973, she described what she saw to Dr. Lucy. They were ghastly, demonic faces. Whenever she witnessed them, she claimed that she felt empty, as though the devil were inside of her. In addition to Fratzen, Anneliese also described experiencing foul-smelling odours, something which she likened to burning fecal matter. As her seizures intensified, Anneliese claimed that the demonic faces were becoming more frequent, and that the voices which accompanied them told her that she was damned to hell. In spite of these episodes, she was relatively able to function normally in day-to-day life, and was even able to maintain a loving relationship with her boyfriend, Peter. Over the next 2 years, Anneliese was taken to see multiple different doctors, and was prescribed medication for both the seizures and the subsequent psychosis. Dr. Lucy, the neurologist, prescribed Dilaton, an anticonvulsant primarily used to treat grand mal epilepsy. Although Anneliese experienced a terrible drawn-out period of illness, it is important to clarify that no one initially believed Anneliese to be possessed. This was regarded as an illness, treatable with medication. Between March and April of 1973, Anneliese began hearing noises in her bedroom. In the middle of the night, she would be awoken by the sound of knocking. No other family member could hear these sounds. Once again, Anneliese was taken to see a doctor, who found her hearing to be perfectly normal. It was during her academic examinations that Anneliese's symptoms escalated. The voices and hallucinations of demonic faces became increasingly worse. Alongside her mental ailments, she was beginning to have trouble speaking and walking. She also suffered from severe bouts of depression. Later, in 1976, during a recorded conversation with a priest, Anneliese would describe this difficult time. "It is a terror which goes through all my limbs and settles there. It is a dread that makes you think you are right there in the middle of hell. You are totally, utterly deserted." One evening over dinner, Anneliese's hands are reported to have swelled up to a huge size. According to her mother's testimony, Anneliese cried out, "I have black hands, my saviour, forgive me." As this occurred, she claimed to be able to see diabolical faces on the wall. She described them as having 7 crowns and 7 horns. By now, the possibility that Anneliese was demonically possessed was being considered. A member of the local church, Thea Hines, is reported to have first suggested this to Anneliese's mother. The ineffectiveness of the medication which Anneliese was on seemed to corroborate this. It was sometime in the second half of 1973 that Anneliese found solace in communications with Father Ernest Alt, a priest who shared her convictions that she was under the influence of Satan. When discussing the case in a later interview, Alt states that he initially approached the case with skepticism. He did not believe that demonic possession could happen in the case of someone who was baptized. In a later statement, Dr. Luthi would assert that it was around this time that Anneliese became incapable of making decisions for herself. Could it be that a vulnerable young woman fell under the influence of Father Alt, her mother, and others in her religiously minded community, which resulted in her believing herself to be demonically possessed? The possibility of demonic possession was seemingly further evidenced by Anneliese's growing intolerance of sacred objects such as holy water and crucifixes. Her mother, Anna, even recalled one episode where Anneliese stood before a statue of the Virgin Mary, her eyes completely black. In May 1975, Anneliese suffered severe emotional trauma. Her grandmother, to whom she had been deeply attached, passed away, and her sister, Barbara, moved away to pursue a career. Authors writing on the subject of Anneliese's alleged possession are keen to stress that this young woman was exceptionally sensitive and increasingly unable to cope with the world around her. Indeed, during a conversation with Father Alt a few months prior, on the 9th of September 1974, Anneliese had made the statement, "I cannot cope with reality." Some authors refer to this as the moment Anneliese suffered a mental breakdown, hallmarked by the development of multiple personalities, known today as a dissociative disorder. At the time, however, demonic possession was regarded as the increasingly likely explanation for Anneliese's condition. It was in 1975 that Father Arnold Renz, a senior priest and exorcist, became involved in Anneliese's case. Upon his first visit, he was astounded by the girl. He claims that while standing, she would be repeatedly thrown to the floor by some great force. Each time she would respond in the same way. She would get up onto her knees and recite the Hail Mary prayer. Anneliese's mother stated that the devil would constantly throw her daughter to the ground, so much so that Anneliese eventually took to sleeping on the floor. She would sleep this way for 3 years. At the court case which dealt with these events after Anneliese's death, the priest stated that they had sent Anneliese to as many doctors and psychiatrists as they could. Anneliese's mother even claimed that it was Dr. Luthi who had recommended that the family consult a Jesuit for help. To many involved in the case, the ineffectiveness of medication evidenced demonic possession. It is necessary to mention, however, that in the late 1960s and early 70s, epilepsy was not as well understood as it was today. The MRI machine, for example, was not invented until 1977, meaning that a full picture of the brain was not possible when Anneliese was diagnosed with epilepsy. In addition, there exists a drug-resistant form of epilepsy, which accounts for some 20 to 40% of epileptics, equal to around 400,000 people in America alone. It is therefore not impossible for Anneliese's epilepsy to have been unresponsive to medication. After all medical avenues were exhausted, the priests Renz and Alt began the preliminary steps towards exorcism. A trial exorcism was conducted by the priests to ascertain whether or not Anneliese was truly possessed. At one point, the priest sat down next to her and mentally commanded, "Depart from her. Say who you are." Immediately, Anneliese went into a frenzy. She grabbed herself by the neck and destroyed the rosary which she was wearing. As with most alleged cases of demonic possession, evidence comes to us in the form of personal eyewitness testimony. In the case of Anneliese Michel, the involvement of the church means that detailed notes and case files were kept by the priests involved in the exorcism. It is because of this that we know Anneliese's destruction of the rosary caused great concern. To the religiously minded, only the most powerful demons can destroy holy objects. After this event, the priests wrote to the Bishop of Wurzburg to approve an exorcism. Once approval had been received, they initiated the centuries-old ritual of Catholic exorcism, also known as the Roman Ritual of 1614. On Sunday, the 3rd of August 1975, Anneliese underwent her first exorcism. The elder of the two, Father Rains, took the spiritual lead. Interestingly, although a religious cure had been sought, a medical one was still being attempted. Anneliese remained on her doctor-prescribed medication until shortly before her death. It is at this point that Anneliese's case escalated once again. As soon as the exorcism began, the demons, without any overt stimulus, spoke through Anneliese in deep guttural voices. Everyone present was deeply disturbed. Such an instant and strong demonic presence was atypical in the exorcist's experiences. In fact, it was so unusual for demons to reveal themselves so early on in the exorcism that the priests were both unprepared, struggling to even comprehend the rapidity with which Anneliese spoke. The pace of the subsequent events compelled them to record everything for the bishop and others to study. It was Anneliese herself who requested that the tapes be made public across the world, so that people would believe there was a devil. It is because of this that we now have access to audio evidence from the exorcism.
Sie müssen mit in die Scheißkassette. Und zwar mit allen zu dem Scheiß gelogen Witzbuschki.
Und dann?
Und dann? Dann muss den Dreck bekannt geben. Wie? So, dass an die Meisterei rankommt. Kapiert?
Allegedly, 6 demons revealed themselves: Lucifer, Judas, Nero, Cain, Hitler, and Fleischmann, a disgraced 16th century Frankish priest.
Ich bin Nero. Ich bin der Dritte im Bunde.
Noch mehr.
Halt ihr Maul. Ich bin kein.
Seid ihr also 4. Und Hitler? Hitler ist gelogen. Sage es deutlich. Im Namen Jesu und im Namen Mariens. Im Namen des Vaters und des Sohnes und des Heiligen Geistes.
Ja, ich bin auch hier. Wer denn? Hitler.
Whenever Hitler possessed Anneliese, he would announce himself to the priests with a Sieg Heil. Bizarrely, Hitler would speak with the correct Austrian inflections. The demons would criticize the church, ridicule the faithful and faithless alike, and exalt their own power. Lucifer is claimed to have said, "I want to conquer the earth for myself." According to exorcists and paranormal experts, these names may have been chosen by demonic entities in order to inspire fear and dread relative to time and place, hence Hitler and Fleischmann, and may not have been reflective of actual demonic names. Whatever the truth behind these names, the atrocities which they allegedly inflicted upon Anneliese were chilling. She would speak in tongues, spend whole days attacking family members with bestial strength, bark like a dog, bite the head off a dead bird, eat spiders, and drink her own urine. Anneliese would also claim to witness demons dancing around the priests in mockery. Invisible forces would throw the tragic girl from wall to wall, so that she was almost always covered in bruises from head to toe. She would also gorge on copious amounts of food and drink, whilst nearly always looking emaciated. In addition, tables and chairs are claimed to have been moved around the house of their own accord. How is it that someone with a serious history of physical illness, including heart and circulatory problems, had the strength to not only attack family members, but also self-harm to such a degree. Whatever the cause of these horrors, they still have the power to terrify, even into the present day. All one needs to do is listen to the priest's audio recordings to hear the blood-curdling howls which erupted from Anneliese. Often, the exorcism sessions would culminate in such brutality that Anneliese would have to be held down or chained to a chair. These terrible episodes would continue for many months. Occasionally, Anneliese would experience periods of lucidity. During these moments, she would spend time with her constant companion Peter and plan out their future together. They hoped to one day be married when all of this was over. Underneath all of the horror, there appears to have been a real sense of hope that either the medicine or the exorcisms or both would cure Anneliese of whatever it was that haunted her. At one time, Anneliese and Peter went for a walk in the nearby woods. However, once there, Anneliese walked off alone. According to Peter, she was in a trance-like state. She would later claim to have walked alongside the Virgin Mary that day. Anneliese reported that she had told her that, "It pains my heart that so many souls are going to hell. Someone needs to do penance. Would you like to do penance for the souls so that they do not enter hell?" Anneliese said that she was given 3 days to consider the Virgin Mary's offer. When they arrived home, she told everyone of her miraculous vision. She said that she felt so much better than she had done in a long time, almost as though the Virgin Mary had relieved Anneliese of her possession whilst she considered the offer. The Michel family was initially skeptical of her vision, but could not deny the happiness that it brought them to see Anneliese in better health. However, when Anneliese expressed her desire to accept the Virgin Mary's proposal, her parents' fear returned. Her mother tried to dissuade her, but to no avail. Anneliese claimed that, in her vision, it was foretold that the Virgin Mary would return to expel the demons on the 31st of October if she chose not to accept the offer. By this day, however, Anneliese was more willing than ever to become a vessel for all of mankind's sins and make a martyr of herself. According to the priests, the demons were unusually passive on this day. Keen to exploit this opportunity, they began an intensive session of exorcism, during which they were able to extract desperate cries of agony from all the demons who claimed to inhabit the girl. When they started praying to the Virgin Mary, a truly chilling cry came from within Anneliese. The priests were then able to make the demons, one by one, agree to leave Anneliese. After that, Anneliese said in her normal voice, "I am completely free now, completely free. It is so wonderful, completely free." It was at this moment that the most unusual twist of any possession case happened. Reportedly, 10 to 15 minutes later, all of the demons were back, complaining that, as much as they wanted to, they could not leave. They were trapped inside of Anneliese. From then on, they would complain daily, sometimes continuously, about how they wanted to leave, yet were mysteriously bound to Anneliese Michel. Father Alt described how they screamed, "We want to go out," but were not allowed to. As for Anneliese herself, in her more lucid moments, she would complain of the great pain she was enduring. On the 30th of May 1976, Father Alt sought help from his friend and physician, Dr. Richard Roth, who had previously been involved in the case. Alt asked him to prescribe medication to help soothe Anneliese's pain. However, the doctor warned against this. In a 2007 interview for a Polish documentary, Father Alt recalled that Roth said, "I can't give medication to a possessed person because I do not know how it might affect them. There is no injection against the devil." After this, the doctor examined Anneliese and apparently noticed that she had stigmata marks, the wounds of Christ, on her legs. Later, it was alleged the seemingly nail-inflicted wounds would spread to her hands. It was from this point onwards that Anneliese began to decay, despite being provided with constant nourishment. She was known to have gorged on large amounts of food in one sitting, then finished by drinking up to 2 liters of juice. Regardless, she was dangerously thin and lost all pallor. According to the priests, Anneliese had had a similar episode of emaciation the previous year, only then to return quickly to normal health. Around the beginning of 1976, Anneliese had claimed that something would change in July. On the 1st of July, at the age of 23, she tragically passed away. By the time of her death, Anneliese had endured the rite of exorcism some 67 times. Some of the sessions lasted up to 4 hours. 42 of these sessions were recorded on tape. The apparent cause of death was starvation. The autopsy report stated that she weighed a mere 30 kilograms and suffered from broken knees due to continuous genuflections. In the aftermath of her death, the government proceeded to file charges of negligent homicide against the 2 priests, Renz and Alt, and Anneliese's parents, Anna and Joseph. In 1978, all 4 were found guilty and were given 6 months suspended prison sentences and 3 years probation. However, the court proceedings were riddled with inconsistencies. Although the defense lawyers submitted the priest's exorcism tapes as evidence, they were never really taken seriously by the court. An expert witness called to give evidence by the prosecution, Professor Satz, is known to have made numerous mistakes in his chronology and subsequent analysis of matters including Anneliese's medical history and possession tapes. Furthermore, the claim that epilepsy had played a part in Anneliese's death was brought into question. The pathologists who carried out a post-mortem examination for the court discovered that her brain was healthy. It showed no damage which could have caused epileptic seizures, not even on a microscopic level. Equally bizarre were the lack of bed sores on her body, ulcerations on the skin which are associated with victims of starvation, which the court claimed Anneliese had been. This fact, and her unusually dilated pupils, were not mentioned in the opinion of the court, meaning that these crucial findings were considered unimportant. This is a telling example of just one of the many instances which undermine how the court handled Anneliese's case. At this point, it is important to bring to light the possible corruption of the court. As East Germany was occupied by Soviet forces and therefore under the influence of communism at this time, state-sponsored anti-religious sentiments were commonplace. State atheism was actively promoted. It is therefore believable that the trial may have been engineered by the state to discredit the Catholic Church, and the possibility that Anneliese was demonically possessed. Certainly, the court openly mocked the positions of the priests. For example, the way in which the judge sought to ridicule Father Alt's faith by asking him the question, "I assume, Father, you are not married, are you?" As we conclude this tragic story, it is necessary to stress that the family of Anneliese Michel never gained any profit from the case or from the 2005 film The Exorcism of Emily Rose, which it later went on to inspire. Indeed, when questioned about the movie by The Telegraph, Mrs. Michel stated, "I don't want to see the film, and I don't know anything about it." This means that the case of Anneliese Michel is a direct contrast to other popular cases such as Amityville, where the Lutz family were directly involved in the book, which was written soon after their experiences, and the subsequent film franchise. Whilst this may call into question their potential motives for fabrication, the same cannot be said for Anneliese Michel. Instead, Anneliese paid the ultimate price, her life, leaving behind a distraught family who would never fully recover from the trauma. To many Catholics, Anneliese Michel is a threat to standardized belief because she offers evidence of a medievalist form of Satan and hell. To them, she is best forgotten. To skeptics, Anneliese was a victim of religious fanaticism combined with mental and physical illness. To a few believers, however, she took the demons with her when she died, martyring herself for our sins, akin to a latter-day Christ figure. Even until this day, people still visit Anneliese's gravesite to leave notes of gratitude and pay homage to her sacrifice. Whatever you believe, the case of Anneliese Michel is one of the most well-documented and most perplexing cases of alleged modern-day demonic possession. If you would like to find out more about the case of Anneliese Michel, or wish to take a look at our source references, then why not read our article on paranormalscholar.com.